Bradley Whitford continued to play Commander Joseph Lawrence in The Handmaid's Tale over the past year, as well as guest starring in the 24th season of Law and Order SVU. I'm Matt
Yes.
Noble of Gold Derby. Welcome, Bradley. And I wanted to kick things off by asking you, when we spoke years ago and you're more at the beginning of playing Joseph Lawrence, you said this role wasn't so much about executing, but it was about discovering this character in scenes. I think you said it was sort of a fuck it, chuck it sort of thing. What years later of playing him, what have you discovered?
Um, what's fun about playing this guy are the contradictions are extreme and very interesting to me, resonate to me in the current unsettling political situation that we're experiencing all around the world, where there seems to be a bit of a backlash against what could be described as liberal democracy. I know that's true where you live, and it's absolutely true where I live. And it's very it's interesting to me to see how a character like this, who's trying, obviously in a heightened situation, is trying to navigate that world. There are a lot of ideas that resonate with things that I'm thinking and really don't have answers to, about things like working within the system or working outside of the system, the seduction of power, which these days has something to do with getting attention. I don't know if you know this, but we had a president who actually was a guy from a reality show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that news got down there. Who actually sort of weaponized the religious right. So it feels very I may not agree with, but I can always find the swings in this guy relatable. And what's fun about it is when I'm playing that guy, I can put that struggle into it, and I don't have to fake that. So it feels very contemporary. The amazing thing, like, as we're talking about this now, I was doing a political broadcast where a former conservative was saying that one of the problems with the left is they will go too far, and they will say, look at Handmaid's Tale. We're turning into the Handmaid's Tale. And to someone working on a farm in Iowa, they're like, we're not turning into the Handmaid's Tale. And that the left delegitimizes itself by making those comparisons. And I said, well, I understand what you're trying to say, but I want to remind you that they are literally banning the book right now. And book bans are gaining steam in the United States. And I don't know if that's happening in Australia. But it's very important for me going into this last year to not let the purpose of the book being written and the purpose of the story being told beyond giving us livings to make and attention to get during award season, like underneath all this, this book has been banned in libraries in several states in the United States, and that should really alarm everybody. I don't know if Joseph Lawrence would agree with that, but that's the thing that's on on the top of my head as I go into this. But playing this guy is just fascinating because of the contradictions in him.
Yeah, and like he's one of the architects of this world, but at the same time, like he seems to have a more pragmatic approach than sort of the religious dogmatic approach to at least personally how he's approaching this world, and that is an interesting balance for you to play.
It occurs to me, I always used to say about West Wing that every show, obviously West Wing again was a heightened situation, and you wouldn't call it a documentary and all of that, but there was a struggle that was real in there, and the question in each show, and the question that a character like Josh wrestled with, and I think one that you could say Lawrence wrestles with, is this idea of how dirty do your feet have to get before you suffocate in the mud in order to make the world a slightly better place. And he's pretty close to sinking in the mud.
And June makes the sort of great point to it, like, or makes an interesting point to him that, because you're aware of some of these things in a way, you're more culpable, you're more responsible because you do have that sort of awareness of what's wrong about what you're doing.
Yeah, and the question is, and it's a relevant political question. I was just screaming at the TV because somebody who I really respect as a thinker is a guy named Cornel West, who is launching a Green Party candidacy because he's basically saying that neoliberalism, that Joe Biden's a neoliberal, hypocrite, and that's no way to fight fascism. And I think the argument I'm having with June is, especially in I don't think our world is there yet, but in that world where even the Canadians, and by the way, there is, I think, people who don't understand that there is a rise on the fascist right in Canada as well. And in our show, it's definitely on the rise. And I'm saying to June, it's a beautiful idea. Now, I don't agree with this, but this is what Lawrence is saying. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful, this whole, freedom thing. But, it killed the planet. And that form of government just doesn't work. We can't all move to Vermont. In the world of the show, there's been this horrible environmental disaster, which has almost wiped out the human race. And basically, I'm saying to her that those ideas are beautiful, but they just did not work. Which is an interesting argument.
Yeah. You directed that episode, the episode Allegiance, I think the first episode you've directed of The Handmaid's Tale, Bradley. How did that shift your perspective on the series and the story, sitting in that director's chair?
It was absolutely one of the joys of my life. I just want to say, we're all sitting here in a I don't even know, are the Emmys going to happen? I don't know, because there is a writer's strike going on. And I don't want to get too into the weeds on that, but I'm incredibly grateful to Eric Tuckman, to Bruce Miller, to all the writers, Yalin Chang, who were kind of the senior writers, who there's an incredible back and forth on that show between actors and writers, directors and writers. And all of those writers are the products of years in writers' rooms. And that's one of the things that the Writers Guild is fighting for. And I'm incredibly grateful to, without writers, I don't have this house. I never had those kids. I'm not talking to you. You don't have a job. And it's one of the weirdest, most upsetting things that writers perpetually in Hollywood are totally undervalued. So I hope they can get what they want, what they need. It was an incredible, the moment Bruce called me. First of all, I am directing in a very safe situation. I think being a director on a high-end episodic show like this is one of the hardest things, because you're an outsider coming in and, as an authority. And put yourself in a young director's shoes coming into season 4 or 5 of The Handmaid's Tale, and having to walk up and give me or Ann Dowd or Lizzie a note. It's terrifying. It's Nicola Daly, who is our DP, who I could not have survived this experience without. It's a difficult position for outsiders. It's much easier for someone who's been there, who knows the crew and everything. I was surprised because I thought, oh, well, they'll give me an episode I'm not in, or that I have very little to do. And I literally think it's maybe Lawrence's biggest episode in the entire show. But as Lizzie has said, and Lizzie, one of the amazing, great things about this is watching Lizzie go from this, ringer, queen of the golden age of television to becoming this extraordinary filmmaker. She has been asked, is it hard to act while you're directing? And the answer is no. It's actually, you are so aware of every question about the show and every scene, and in a way that as an actor you can get away with just sort of coming in and doing your little scene. So yeah, I thought I'd be, well, they'll give me a little episode, what we call a bottle episode, in the studio, and instead I'm out there. There's planes and there's flags are getting shot up, and all sorts of stuff. But I loved it.
Well, now you've gotten a chance to direct Lizzie. She's gotten a chance to direct you. You play so many scenes together, and we've talked in the past about just like how you sort of came to start working together on The West Wing, and it's so interesting to think of that first scene where I think you're tasting the chili she's making in The West Wing, all the way through to now.
Yeah.
How important is trust in your guys' relationship for doing what you do on the show?
It's Lizzie wasn't there, but the other night we had a panel at the DGA, and I didn't get to say this, but everybody was saying a version of, there is no experience in storytelling like it, and no bigger joy or privilege than what you get to do deep into a fascinating series like this, because the relationships are so deep, and the trust is so deep. The best direction, there is a take of her in the garden right before she trashes it on the phone, and it's a conversation with me, which was very bizarre. It's a phone conversation, and we had done my side of it like a month before. I want to make sure I have my lines in front of me. I have uh, a context on, so I'm listening to the take, but I also have the phone as I'm talking to her, and we had a really good take of it. But the best, the take we ended up using, and I think the best direction I've ever given, and Lizzie's the one I would give this to, is I walked up to her and I said, I kind of acted very confidential, and I said, pretend I just told you something brilliant and go do whatever the fuck you want. Uh, and that was the take. And it's an incredible take to me, filled with all sorts of the sort of contradiction and complexity uh, of our relationship, because there is absolutely a kind of love and trust there that we're lucky to have off screen as well. It's certainly, I like, you just don't get that experience in a movie. I mean, you go, you meet somebody, you try to pretend like you've known each other for a long time, and then you leave. But these are people that we've been with for the better part of a decade. And with Lizzie, I've known her since she was 17. So it's a real joy to be able to do that, and one of the real joys of television.
And on the flip side of the coin, your guest turn on Law and Order SVU, you don't have years to develop that character. You have to come in, tell his story in one episode.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It's funny when you say that. Mariska is absolutely universally adored for very, very good reason. Incredibly sane, incredibly supportive. A lot of actors have gone through that show, and most of them will tell you that she said something to them that really helped them. She's a really sane, grounded human being. I could tell she was trying to do something difficult and new for the show, and I would do anything for her. And but I could tell it was something hard. And when we first began shooting it, there's always a part of you, the scared part, that gets testy and angry, and you feel sort of victimized. And at the beginning of that, I was like, this journey of this character, like, should, we're basically trying to do that, like that movie The Father, and shoot it in, I think it was 5 days. Really quick, uh, changes, and modulations, and it's just a crazy television schedule. So I was afraid of that. I was really afraid of it. I was so proud of her because I think the power's up. That's a very valuable thing, and trying to bring a little magical realism into it. I really hope she gets some recognition. The teaser of that show is, I remember reading it, and it's, me, my character starting as a kid, and and I was like, are people going to buy this, sort of this quickly? And uh, it's a phenomenal teaser, and she pulled off, uh, when I've been on long running shows, I can't believe they've been doing this for a quarter of a century. Have they been doing it?
Yeah, it's 24
Um,
seasons, so yeah, that should be right.
but it's very smart. You're walking a very fine line with with a loyal audience like that. And I loved her instinct to push the parameters of the show without betraying it, but really miraculously expanding what that show can encompass. And she is one of the funniest, sweetest human beings on the planet.
Yeah. No, and just if people watching this don't know, she directed that episode, which was really cool. And that opening sequence actually for me was a bit reminiscent of the film Up, how you see that relationship
Yeah,
just
yeah,
play
yeah.
out to music from childhood to senior age.
And
Um,
she
yeah,
was ready, man. She was really ready. And I know she feels, that crew is, they're in love with her. She creates an amazing atmosphere. Uh so yeah, it was a real joy.
yeah. We were talking like earlier about The Handmaid's Tale and some of the themes that that touches on today in today's world. And you mentioned Trump and how he sort of, got the religious right riled up. And you also, like in The Handmaid's Tale, we see sort of religion used as a weapon, as a cudgel. Which for me is a little uncomfortable because I'm a churchgoer, and that's for me the most chilling scenes in the show is seeing the religious hypocrisy and the religion used as a weapon, and words that I love being used by these sorts of people. And I know, like, it did anything like because your experience on The West Wing, you got to work with someone who never part of the religious right, but is a tremendous man of faith, Martin Sheen,
Yes.
and one of my favorite scenes in The West Wing is your scene with Martin in The Shadow of Two Gunmen Part 2, where he meets you at the airport. And I just, can you take us back to that scene with Martin from that episode, which was one of your two Emmy submissions, because back then you submitted two tapes
Oh, really?
for supporting actor. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I remember that where we were shooting it in the airport. I mean, the relationship with Martin was really emotional, um for me, because I always said that the alchemy of that show had something to do with Martin's casting, because nobody had to act their devotion and affection to Jed Bartlett, because we had it uh, with Martin. Um, I lost my father between shooting the. My father saw the pilot, and then it passed away before the show hit, and I think um, I always felt that kind of paternal uh, connection with Martin, which was just accentuated by the loss of my dad, who was an incredibly sweet guy. You talk about, I guess, Handmaid's Tale is, uh, a warning
Mm.
about these religious movements that I think what you're talking about are actually, uh, in the Christian world, inversions of what we think of as Christian values. And one of the one of the upsetting things to me in the media is the only portrayals and sort of civic discourse of religious voices are voices of condemnation, hatred, and exclusion. And that seems to me to be the inversion of any rational reading of the New Testament. Or I was raised by an atheist Quaker, but one of my best friends, I am part of a progressive religious community in an Episcopalian church, and I just lost someone who was actually a very conservative Catholic, who was a very important person in my life, but who was an example of it's so crazy now, because it's almost the religious right is basically saying hate your neighbor. It's really crazy. But yeah, I veered. I veered on that.
That's all right, Bradley. Well, thanks so much for talking with us today. All the best of luck with the upcoming Emmy Awards. Thanks so much for the time today. People can go to goldderby.com to follow our awards coverage there. Bradley,
it's always great to see you, Matt.
It's so great to see you. Thanks so much.